Hello, it is Mermay at the moment, and I've been sketching, illustrating, painting mermaids here and there. And one of the sketches I came up with was this Nudibranch-Inspired Mermaid, and I decided that I really liked the design and I wanted to take it to a finish, and I decided to record some of the process of it. So, first off, though, I want to invite you to create along with me if you so desire. If there's anything you love creating with, be it sketching, knitting, whatever it could be, feel free to join along with me and do some creating for a little bit. But otherwise, just continue on with what you were doing. You are more than welcome to. To start off with, in the process, right now you're seeing me transfer the sketch by eye onto watercolour paper, and during this I also changed a few things here and there, mainly which way things were bending in order to give a slightly different sense of the flow that she's experiencing in the sketch. I had my sketchbook next to me on a table easel, and I just kept looking over to refer to it, to decide what I was keeping, what I was changing, and things like that. Other than that, I was freehand transferring the sketch, and I'm using a 0.5mm HB mechanical pencil, which is one of my favourites for both sketching and for starting off illustrations. And I'm using Saunders Waterford hot pressed cotton watercolour paper, and it is the 140 slash 300 GSM watercolour paper. I have been enjoying, I'd probably say out of all of the hot press papers I've tried, I enjoy this one the most. I'm hesitating to say. Not that I've tried that many, but it's more that I'm finding that I'm it's very close between Saunders Waterford and Arches for me at the moment. And each of them have their strengths, their own strengths and weaknesses. So it's figuring out which one I want to use to take advantage of its strengths without minding its weaknesses. And at the moment, that's still something I'm trying to figure out. But it's something that I do want to keep in mind going forward, because not only is it important for my illustrations like this, but it's also something that I'm considering for if I want to entirely traditionally do a comic, both in sense of in inking, but also doing the colouring with watercolour. So that's something that I'm keeping in mind a lot at the moment. There are, however, some other methods that I'm interested in trying as well for potentially doing traditional comics and also some traditional digital hybrid comics. So I am very open to experimenting at the moment, and I'm just playing with things and seeing what sticks. But I do know that if I do want to go ahead with comics, and I do find that they are something that I really enjoy doing, that having a major traditional element to them is going to be something that's important to me, because the process of it is so dear to my heart and brings me so much joy. And I think that is something that I would need to do something very long term, like a comic, at whatever scale I ended up doing it at. But we're talking about mermaids today, we're not talking about comics. I am inking right now with fine liners, if you can't tell, but right at the back of the table there is also a Sakura Pigma FB brush pen as well, which I did bring out on a couple occasions, but mostly I was using fine liners. And I do like fine liners for the slight variation in line you can get. Right now you're seeing me use the brush pen, and I did use those for the like more frilly, I can't remember the name of them right now. If there are any biologists in the comments, hit me up. What are these things called? Let me know. So where were we? Inking. So I used the brush pen like you're seeing now for areas on the tail mainly, and then for most of the rest I was using fine liners. Even for areas that you would assume there's variation caused by the brush pen, I do sometimes just do that with fine liners. It just depends on how I'm feeling, what I feel like an area needs, which one I end up reaching for, and it's nice for me to just have a few things out on the table. Speaking of which, we'll get onto the watercolors. So you're seeing me pick out 3 watercolors here, and these are the colors that I chose from my expansion palette. And the expansion palette, I've done videos on it in the past. If you love watercolours, you're welcome to go off and watch that. But it is a Holbein detachable palette that you can remove the slanted wells and they click into place. And I have been really loving that process in my watercolour painting at the moment, because I can go to my expansion palette, snap out a bunch of colours that I want to use, and then I just rest them on my main palette. And I've been doing that a bunch recently while painting, and I've been loving it. And then I can just put it all away again. And I only have the two palettes for my painting process, and it's working out really well for me right now. I can, for anyone wanting an update on the palette situation, I'm really enjoying it. So you saw me have the Iso-Indolynone Yellow Deep, the PY110 there. There was also Cobalt Turquoise Light, which is PG50, and Phthalo Blue Green Shade PB15. And those were the only ones that I brought out from the expansion palette, and for the rest I used my main palette. And the colours that I used from that, for off the top of my head, were Brown Red, which is PBR25, Transparent Pyrrole Orange. I can't remember the pigment number of that right now, but it is discontinued. It's the discontinued one. It was discontinued back in 2019, I think, somewhere around there. And then there was Dioxazine Violet, which is PV23, and Quinacridone Rose, which is, of course, PV19. So those were all of the pigments I used for this. To get the blue that you're seeing me use right now, I mixed together phthalo blue green shade with dioxazine violet in order to get a warm blue. So that was how I got the blue in the background. For the body, the paler blue that you see, that was mixing together the cobalt turquoise light with the phthalo blue green shade and watering it down, and that enabled me to get some granulation from that cobalt turquoise light, but without it being too opaque, because obviously with me painting over line art, I don't want it to be super opaque. So for any of you wondering that know pigments, why on earth I was using PG50, that is why I was using it very watered down and mixed with a transparent pigment. For the area you're seeing me use right now, that was mixing together the phthalo blue green shade with, what's it called? Brown red. There we go. Mixing it with brown red. And then after the layer that you're seeing me apply right now dried, I went over with some further layers. And for those layers, I used a similar mixture again, but darker. So this is what you're seeing me do right now. Similar mixture again, but darker. More pigment, less water. But then I also added in some variation in colour by adding in some just brown red or just phthalo blue green shade, or I also added in little bits of the transparent pyrrole orange, which you're seeing me do now. So that was how I added in the slightly changing dark areas on the tail. And in areas you'll see me wash that out as well. And that's pretty much the process that I was going for with this, was adding slight or sometimes quite dramatic changes in colour. And I wanted to have some shifting tones in her, because I wanted her to seem very like you'd find her among the coral reef or something like that. I wanted her to be very colourful, but also have lots of lovely little shining colour variations going on. I didn't want her to just be blue, right? I didn't want her to just be a flat blue everywhere. So I wanted to have some nice variation and also some gradients going on. So another thing you'll see me do to the light blue areas is adding some very subtle color variation, but also adding some gradients, and that'll be later in the process as well. I know some people are curious and ask others if they listen to music while they create, and I have covered this before in the past, but I thought I would talk about it again since it is in recent memory for this particular one. I was listening to music during the flow process of this. So, music to me is important in my creative process, but it takes up one of two roles. It is either what helps me come up with ideas, and that then has a very forward role in things like its meaning, its mood, and things like that. That plays a massive role when I'm using it to help me come up with ideas. But then in other areas, it is in the background while I create, and it's more of like an element of flow when I'm doing my process. And in this particular illustration, there wasn't music that inspired it. Instead, the music was more when I was doing the process, when I was in the state of flow. And in this particular instance, it was listening to the new Sleep Token album on repeat. So, for anyone curious about that particular thing, there you go. Like I said, I have mentioned it in the past before. When it comes to coming up with ideas with music, I have a few illustration ideas and a story idea as well that music has been playing a massive role into. And you should see some of those at some point. I am interested in doing one of the illustrations before too long. That one has been begging for my attention, and we'll see where I end up sharing that. I'm sure it'll end up being somewhere. I've been really enjoying blogging recently. I started blogging a few months ago. I've mentioned it in a few, I think I've mentioned it in a video. If I haven't, I do blog to do with art, and the links for all of that are in the description. And I've been using that as a place to share little insights, little things that I do regarding like my creativity, also my self-studying process, all aspects of the art journey really I'm exploring on the blog, but also I talk about my illustration process. I talk about art materials because I love art materials and talking about art materials, and it's just a nice place for me to explore whatever I want to, really. And it's a very different form of sharing than the ones that are a little bit more typical in the current era of the internet. And I really like that at the moment. It's been a really nice place for me lately. As we're wrapping this up now, you might notice that I've brought out the colour pencils, and I mainly used these for the orange areas. I just wanted a slightly more dramatic gradient, and I wasn't quite getting what I was looking for by applying watercolour. I did try and do a couple more layers, and it just wasn't quite getting to where I wanted it to, so I brought out the colour pencils for those. I just used an orange and a yellow, and that got it to where I wanted it to be. I did also add a little bit of colour variation in the blue, the light blue areas. There's a lot of blue going on, I should probably specify. In the light blue areas on her like torso, I did add a little bit of colour variation using colour pencils as well. And then other than that, I used a white gel pen to just add a couple details on, and then this is the finish. So thank you so much for joining along with me today. If you did end up creating anything, let me know what you're up to in the comments, and I will see you next time. Bye!